Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And today we're reacting to a series against the Nationals. The Phillies won 3 out of 4 games in. And all of a sudden, we're worried about the manager again? We'll break it down in today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk radio space. 5 years over at 97.5 The Fanatic as an on-air host there, talking sports in Philly. Also, 3 years a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member. And this is my third season as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB. And you can use code, it's all in lowercase, Locked On MLB, and you'll get a first deposit match up to $100. I'll let you know off the bat. Sorry, you may be able to hear it. Voice is a little bit scratchy today. So I'm going to try and make through without completely losing my voice here. But it was a good weekend for the Philadelphia Phillies. I have very little issue with what happened for the Phillies over the 4 games against the Nationals. I know one of those games was Thursday night, and we talked about that on Friday's episode with the cycle that Weston Wilson hit, that 13-3 victory. You feel great, right? And then Friday night, the Phils win 3-2. Carlos Estevez blows the 2-0 lead in the 9th inning. And then Trey Turner hits a walk-off with the bases loaded, hits it off the wall. Great. Saturday, Christopher Sanchez goes complete game 2-hitter. Yeah, awesome. So you've won 4 in a row by that point after winning the last against the Marlins, the first 3 against the Nationals. You've won the series against Washington. And, well, yesterday you come up short. A 6-4 final where you did see Bryson Stott go yard, Brandon Marsh go yard. You're looking at a situation like Trey Turner. Like, a lot of stuff happened where it showed flashes of this team coming out of it. I mean, yesterday you had a situation where 3 guys went yard, and in Turner, Stott, and Marsh, they were kind of the guys on the team you were most worried about hitting the ball out of the ballpark. Turner had a long homerless drought. Marsh has not been swinging it well. Stott has not been swinging it well. They're starting to look like they're coming out of it. I know what some people are going to say. We're going to cover this part of it first. It's just the Nationals. Well, you're right, but you can only play the teams in front of you. And maybe this was a get-right time for the Phillies, playing the Marlins and the Nationals and going 4-2 last week in 6 games. I told you, the expectation, 4-2. It's what they did. I can't be mad at them, right? I like what the Philadelphia Phillies have been doing. Yesterday's game, Matt Strahm, Jeff Hoffman, they both give up runs coming into a situation where they could have given the Phillies a chance to win that baseball game. And that's annoying. Like, in a vacuum, losing to the Nationals is annoying. But baseball games aren't played in a vacuum. They're played on Earth. And the only vacuum I know in the natural world is space. And there you go. You got a little science talk. Bottom line is that you're looking at the whole season. You're looking at a bigger stretch of the season. You're looking at a series. You're looking at more than just one game at a time when the Philadelphia Phillies play. And that leads into my next point. Because for all the positives this weekend, how well this team played. Christopher Sanchez becoming one of, 3 pitchers in baseball have 2 or multiple complete games this year. He now has a complete game shutout and another complete game 2-hitter on his resume. Trey Turner hit a walk-off. It was a great weekend. I wore the shirt a bunch, the victory shirt. I don't have it on today, obviously, because the Phillies lost yesterday. So got a chance to actually wash it, which you can definitely use. It probably smells awful right now. But there are a lot of great things that happen, and yet I walk in today to the radio station, and I start seeing some of the commentary from people about not pinch hitting Bryce Harper yesterday in the 9th inning, or JT Realmuto, or even Weston Wilson, not pinch hitting guys late in that game when you had a chance of Cal Stevenson coming to the plate late in that one. And Rob Thomson talked about it. He was asked about it after the game, and he talked about wanting to give these guys full days off. And he said that it was absolutely difficult for him to not go pinch hit Bryce Harper or JT Realmuto in that spot. It's tough. He wants his best players out there. Rob Thomson is not saying, oh, we're fine losing this ball game. He's not. Baseball is a war of attrition. It's a long, long season with a lot of players that come in and out based on injury. And you want to deliver the healthiest team, the most rested team. You want to get to the end point of the regular season expending as little energy as possible. or at least that's Rob Thomson's philosophy. And the question that I think is currently raging in his head, or always raging on in his head, he's fighting a battle between how do I get my best team on the field most often, but how do I find these guys rest to get to the postseason where I'm not like the Atlanta Braves of the past 2 years, where you've got starting pitchers banged up, or you're missing important position players, or you're tired from having played like your star players close to or all of the 162 games. That's not the strategy Rob Thomson employs. It never has been. And if this was a situation where the Phillies had gone out in the wild card round and then gone out in the NLDS the past 2 years, I would be losing my mind with Rob Thomson right now. But you know what he's done? He's taken over and taken this team to the World Series and the NLCS, a game away from the World Series. And it was not his fault they lost that series. It was more his whole team went cold in 2 games at home, you could play those 2 games at Citizens Bank Park last year against the Diamondbacks a million times. And the Phillies are going to win one like every other time. What are you going to do? I say this so much. I'm not relitigating the NLCS from last year. But my point is that Rob Thompson's resume of his philosophy of keeping his players healthy, giving them ample rest, giving guys days off sometimes when maybe those players don't want days off, has paid dividends. So if you're looking at it and you're saying, well, Rob Thomson, he doesn't know what he's doing. How could you not put your best hitter out there in a spot with a chance to win the ball game? Are you choosing not to give yourself the best chance to win ball games? The answer is yes. He is choosing not to give himself the best chance to win ball games. And to some people who look at every individual baseball game like a football game where there's only 17 of these suckers and you got to win every one you can, are losing their minds. But you know how I see it? Well, I say, you gave Bryce and JT an off day. And then they have another off day today as they travel down to Atlanta for a really big series with a division rival, the team closest to you in your divisional standings. Those series where if you win 2 of 3 games or, hey, maybe even sweep, you could be looking at a situation where the divisional race is over in August or close to it. That's pretty high stakes compared to a game on a Sunday against the Nationals in a series you've already won 3 out of 4 games in. You starting to kind of see what I'm talking about here? He's not choosing to say, well, I don't think Bryce Harper's good enough to hit in this spot, or I don't care about winning this baseball game. You can't have everything, folks. It's not going to be perfect. You have to make certain concessions over the course of a baseball season to try and keep your team as healthy as possible. And that's why there's 162 games, and you're going to lose a bunch of them. Like the greatest teams in history are going to lose 50-some games. That's just an accepted part of the sport. And Rob Thomson knows that. He's been doing this a long time. He knows how to find a way to deliver a healthy team to the postseason. I know that because I've seen him do it the past 2 years. So I'm choosing to continue to trust him. I'm choosing to trust how he's handling the rotation and the bullpen and where he's going. Now, there are times where he puts the wrong pitcher in the game and it has nothing to do with rest. There are times where I don't like the setup of the lineup, who's batting where. I'm not saying he's perfect, but I'm saying when he gives guys days off, there's a good reason for that. And his thought process, I'd imagine, from hearing what he said about it over the years, he's been Phillies manager, is to make sure that these guys are as rested and healthy as possible when you get to October. Because what do we know? You could win 140 games in the regular season. It does not matter. Some 80-win team is going to come into your ballpark and beat the brakes off you. Or some 90-win team is going to find a way to make a series interesting. Or you're going to have players playing every day, and by the time you come to the postseason, they're not going to be playing at their best. And you know whose fault that is on that 140-win team? It's not the managers. It's not. It's just the sport, guys. It's literally just the sport. It's so hard to find a way to win the World Series. That's why champions, World Series, it's rare to see repeating champions in baseball. I mean, you don't really see it as often because of the luck that goes into it. And the best way to get lucky is to have your best players available when it matters. It's much harder to get lucky when you're missing, for example, just throwing aside, like an MVP candidate and a Cy Young candidate and half your bullpen and other people in the starting rotation. And another player gets hit in the wrist the other day or yesterday, I believe. And that's the situation the Atlanta Braves are in right now. And I'm not saying Rob Thomson is saving these guys' seasons by not playing them in one at bat on a Sunday game before an off day. I understand it sounds crazy, but if you're going to have this philosophy when it makes the most sense, you're going to have this philosophy on days where it makes a little bit of sense. If there's any type of it, like there's any reason why you feel that this could benefit your team, Rob Thomson has to weigh the possibilities of doing that. And if Rob Thomson had hit Bryce Harper in the ninth inning there, in a spot where a lot of people wanted him to pinch hit Bryce Harper, because you had a chance to find a way to win that ball game or tie up that ball game, I would not have been mad. I would not have come on and said, why in the world did he let him pinch hit because he was supposed to have the day off? Like, I wouldn't have been mad the other way. It would have been fine. I'm not pretending like it would have caused Bryce Harper's leg to explode to taking it bad or something. But what I am saying is Rob Thomson trusts the decisions he makes. He sticks with them. He is a guy that when he makes decisions, he will continue to employ that philosophy. And the past 2 years, as much as people can debate the individual games and decisions, this team has been the best team in the National League over the past 2 seasons. I know last year they were the second best team, but you combine the two, and that's Rob Thompson's tenure. So that's my thoughts on the situation yesterday. I can't believe we're still doing this because the Phillies will create problems for us over the course of 162 games. We saw that with the stretch that they were in. Prior to this, we don't need to create problems for ourselves by nitpicking every single thing the manager does. Coming up next, we're going to look at the Atlanta Braves and where they're at in the standings and health-wise and all of this stuff compared to the Phillies as the Phils travel to Atlanta today, preparing to take on their division rival in a series that seems to be an opportunity for the death blow in this NL East race. We'll get into it coming up as we continue Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about Prize Picks first, though. They're our title sponsor for today's episode. They're also America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. They got over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other websites or apps or anything like that with daily fantasy sports platforms, Prize Picks is just you against the numbers. You don't play against other players or anything like that. No, if you get it right, you get it right. If you get the lineup right, you get money. That's Prize Picks. That's the way to set it up. What you do is you just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projection. You watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. So you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a snap. It takes 60 seconds, maybe less than a minute, to set a Prize Picks lineup. You just have to look at, for example, say the Phillies, when they go down to Atlanta tomorrow, Bryce Harper's going to play. And you say, okay, Bryce Harper, what if the number is 1.5 hits? And you say, oh, he's going to have more than that. I think he's going to have 2. You just put that together. You do that 4 times over with different players or the same player in different stats, and you can find winning with Prize Picks. They're absolutely awesome, and they're going to even give you a great deal when you download the Prize Picks app. So you download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. You put 100 in, they'll give you an additional 100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, let's talk about where the Atlanta Braves are right now in terms of comparison to the Philadelphia Phillies. The simple way to do this is standings, but health is also important. Mentality is important. I just want to give some framing. We'll talk more about the series tomorrow. We'll preview game 1. We'll preview expectations for a tough stretch, which we're going to do that coming up next. But I'm specifically talking about games against the Braves. But we're just going to take an overview approach today since it's an off day. Right now in the NL East, the Philadelphia Phillies have a 7-game lead on the Atlanta Braves, a 9-game lead on the New York Mets, Nationals 17.5, Miami Marlins 27. So the only 2 teams in the division that are still in the conversation are Atlanta and the Mets. And they're a bit of a ways off. For framing, the Baltimore Orioles and New York Yankees are tied in the American League East, so no margin for error there. Minnesota's 2 games back in the AL Central. Seattle's 4 games back in the AL West. The Padres are 3 games back in the NL West. The only team, and it is more of a product of their division, that has a bigger lead than the Phillies is the Milwaukee Brewers, and that's because at 72-52 and 11 games up, no other team in Milwaukee's division, the NL Central, is over 500 right now. The next closest team is 2 games under 500 in the St. Louis Cardinals. I don't know what happened to that division that was tight, but the Brewers clearly are the best team there. And while they're a good baseball team, they have a worse record than the Phillies. So it's not like they're just blowing away everybody. They're just, division is weird. But you look at that and you say, okay, so the race that's most likely over is the National League Central. The next one you point to is the NL East. Just simple math, folks. So you have a little bit of a buffer, and you have 3 games against Atlanta coming starting tomorrow. So you win all 3 of those games, well, you're looking at a situation where you would be 10 games up on the Atlanta Braves. Now, the Mets could change now if you win all 3, the Mets wouldn't be able to gain any ground on you. So at worst, it would be the Mets in second place, 9 games back, and Atlanta 10 games back. But that 10 games back, and with 73 wins already for the Philadelphia Phillies, 51 losses. I'm just doing some quick math because I can't do math in my head because I am a moron when it comes to numbers. But that's 38 games remaining, including the 3 against the Atlanta Braves. Let's take off 3 for the series against Atlanta, put you at 35 left. If you're up 10 games on the Braves with 35 to play, I mean, that's over, folks. That's for all intents and purposes over. I'm not ready to, I'm not celebrating anything until we know for sure, because I remember 2007 and I remember what the Philadelphia Phillies did to the New York Mets. So I know weird things can happen. Strange things happen in baseball all the time. But when I see that, I say, okay, that's big time. On the other hand, let's say you lose all 3 and it's now a 4-game difference with 35 to play. That gets tight, folks. That gets nerve-wracking. And that's why this is a really big series. Now, let's say you win 1. Atlanta wins 2, and it's a normal series. No one sweeps anybody. You'd be looking at a situation where you give up a game, but with only a couple more games between these 2 teams. And part of the equation is looking at the Philly schedule and knowing that you have, against the Atlanta Braves, 4 more games after this. So you have another series at the end of the month of August and starting September, where you're going to play 4 more games. You have 7 total remaining against the Braves, 7 that you are up. I mean, realistically, you could lose every game to the Braves, the next 7 games that you play, the final 7, and still be in a situation where you can win the division. But it's not ideal. So you're going down there with the goal to win the series. You're going down there with the absolute baseline to win 1 of the 3 games. Getting swept's not an option. And anything better than that, I mean, heck yeah, we'll take it. So that's kind of where you're at in the divisional race. And I don't think the Mets are the quality of team to chase down the Phillies. I really don't. That's just where I stand on the issue. I don't look at them in the same category as the Braves, and I don't look at the Braves as the same category as the Phillies. And here's part of the reason why. Let's talk about the health of these teams. That's the next conversation to be had. We know with Atlanta, you're already looking at a team that lost Ronald Acuna Jr. for the year, Spencer Strider for the year. They are reeling when it comes to the players that they have available. They just had A.J. Minter go for surgery. They're having situations in their rotation, and they just found out, yesterday, Austin Riley got hit on his wrist by a pitch. It is not in the best shape, according to reports out of Atlanta. They had inconclusive tests done yesterday. They're going to test him again. They don't know if he's going to play in this series against the Phillies. So if you play him without Austin Riley and already without all those other guys like the Braves, the story of the season for Atlanta has been injury, 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 injury. I said it 5 times. I don't think it's enough. They are snake bitten when it comes to injuries. And I'm not reveling in that fact. I hate seeing guys go down. These are human beings that are having tough, painful injuries. What I will say is it does make it a little bit different when you look at the matchup between the Phillies and the Braves and understand who's going to be out on the floor for each of these like it's basketball. Who's going to be out on the field for each of these teams? The Phillies have the distinct advantage health-wise, which brings us back to that earlier conversation that we were having about Rob Thomson and how he's handled the Philadelphia Phillies getting off days. I'm not saying that the Phillies are Rob Thomson away from being as hurt as the Braves. I'm saying that weird things can happen, and the less you put your guys out there, the better chance you deliver a healthy team to the postseason. Realistically, you're not going to sit Bryce Harper for a week because you're he's got to be ready to go. But the less you put guys out there, the healthier you're going to be. And you've seen how much injuries can change the ceiling of a team. Atlanta was a team that a lot of people predicted to win the National League East. A lot of people predicted to win the National League. A lot of people predicted to be better than the Philadelphia Phillies. They're not. And part of that reason is injury. So that's something to keep an eye on in the series. Phillies have the distinct advantage in the health category. And the final thing is mentality, right? When you look at these 2 teams mentally, we've been in Atlanta's spot. We know exactly what that feels like to go into a series where you need to track down a team that's ahead of you and possibly pulling away and has been ahead of you all year. And you are pressing. You're like, we got to win all 3 of these to even give ourselves a chance in the next 4-game series coming up in about like a week and a half. We've got to do everything we can to close this gap now. There's no margin for error. We talked about it when the Phillies were going through their tough stretch. Pressing makes you make mistakes, makes it harder for you to play consistently good baseball. Atlanta's going to be doing those same types of things, probably more so to an extent than the Phillies were when they were slumping, because the Phillies knew that record-wise they were still fine. So the Phillies are going in, feet kicked up, laid back, saying, you got to chase us down. And we have a pretty sizable lead. Atlanta's coming in saying, man, we got a tall task. And if we drop anything, one game, one fly ball, one ground ball doesn't go the right way, man, it could be the difference between being in an even worse spot. And, now we can't lose one game. So if we do lose one game, well, now we're going to panic. And then that might compile into losing 2 games. And that is the manic approach that is taken. And it's not like that dramatic, but I'm dramatizing it for the sake of you understanding where those guys are at mentally as they see the Philadelphia Phillies come in. I don't think they're scared of the Phillies. Like, I don't think they see the division, because I remember being on the other side and saying, well, the Phillies aren't scared of Atlanta when Atlanta was winning division titles year after year after year. And hey, the divisional race is not wrapped up yet, so I'm not crowning the Phillies anything. But what I am saying is the feeling of this series is a lot different down south than it is up here, and that's a benefit mentally to the Philadelphia Phillies. We'll discuss the X's and O's more in tomorrow's episode, but yeah, that's why I think the Philadelphia Phillies are in a pretty darn good spot. Coming up next, we're going to look at a tough 2-week stretch of the schedule, though. It's not just Atlanta. There's some other tough teams mixed in there, and what the expectation should be. We'll discuss as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Phillies. But first, let's talk a little bit about FanDuel. Come on, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little bit different for you going on. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So that's 3 free NFL games. I don't know, a lot of NFL games that you can get taken care of. Like, then with the YouTube TV base plan, you're going to be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. So you have YouTube TV. You make a $5 bet. If you're any customer, not new customers, any customer of FanDuel, you get 3 weeks free of NFL Sunday Ticket. Like, that's perfect. Out of market games, no problem. Everything that you want to bet on with FanDuel, going to be on your TV when it comes to the NFL season for those 3 weeks. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So go ahead and check that out with FanDuel. That's an amazing promotion and a great way, with football season right around the corner, for you to watch your favorite team, even if you're not in market. Check it out with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, yes, we're going to jump into a tough 2-week stretch for the Philadelphia Phillies. Before we do that, excuse me, I do want to let you know that, thank you, is what I'm losing my voice now. Told you it was going to happen. Thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, the host of the Locked On MLB podcast, he covers the league in general. We've been doing a little bit of overview, keeping an eye on who's chasing the Phillies, who the Phillies are trying to chase down in the overall standings, how close they are to clinching up the NL East, and how they can get that done, and all of this stuff going on. Well, Sully does it every day, the MLB perspective, not just on the Phillies, but all these teams. So go ahead and check it out. It's Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's take a peek at this stretch from the Philadelphia Phillies upcoming. August, we don't have that much longer in it. These days are flying, folks. Can you believe it's already the 19th of August? That means we're getting close to the end of the regular season. We have about a month and 10 days left before the Philadelphia Phillies will know where they're set up for October and know where they're playing in the first or second round of the postseason. I say first or second round because there's no guarantee that they have the first round bye yet. They got to continue to wrap some stuff up while they're solid in the division. The lowest divisional champion behind the Brewers and the Dodgers, if the Phillies do end there, which seems to be the likely divisional champion, whatever. The lowest of the NL West, NL Central, and NL East divisional champions by record will end up playing in the wild card round anyway. We know how that works. You don't want that. So other stuff to do. But let's just look at the stretch coming up as August wraps to a close. You got 3 against the Braves in Atlanta. That's going to be tough. 1 out of 3 games there. Sure, cool. We're looking at that as survivable simply because you're looking at the division. That's not good for the overall race for the National League top seed or one of the top 2 seeds, but for the NL East purposes, that's fine. But that's a tough series going to a division rival on the road. Then you travel to Kansas City. The Royals are a pretty good baseball team. They're 69-55. Bobby Witt Jr. is one of the best players in baseball this year. He's absolutely amazing. So, yeah, I'm looking at a situation where that series could go well, but it could also go poorly for the Phillies. The Royals are good. Then you head back home for 3 games against the Houston Astros, 67-56, a team with the championship-type pedigree. They were in the ALCS last year. They were in the World Series the year before. They're the only team in baseball that has the playoff success that the Phillies have had over the past 2 years. The Astros are still a solid baseball team. I think the Phillies are better than Atlanta, Kansas City, and Houston. But playing all those teams together, that's going to be a tough stretch. Then, like I told you, you have 4 more games against the Atlanta Braves to round out the month and start September. Okay, wow. So hang on. You're getting this right. Like the Braves are a 66-win baseball team. They are. Now, are they more talented than that? Probably, with the injuries and all that stuff. But they're a 66-win team. That's the lowest win total of any team you're going to face before the start of September. You play 3, 6, 9, 13 games against teams with 66 or more wins. 2 of those series are on the road. That's going to be tough. Man, 6-6 is not possible because it's 13 games, but that would be 500. So 7-5, would that be where I want it to be? Or you could go 7-6. I'm an idiot. 7-6 would get you to 13. I told you I'm a moron when it comes to numbers. That would be acceptable. That would be a fine stretch for this baseball team in the next 4 series, 7-6. If you go any better than that, wow, we're feeling real good about the Phillies. It's also an interesting time because the conversation about it just being the Nationals that we had earlier when we were talking about the great weekend for the Phillies, there's no way that carries over if you beat the Braves, and then if you beat the Royals, and then if you beat the Astros, and then you beat the Braves again. Like, these are all quality baseball teams. So you're making a big jump in competition level, but you could also be making a big change in the narrative of, is this team back to their winning ways? That's something that we'll keep an eye on too. I like to play good teams because, one, it's an interesting setup. I think it makes for a more interesting baseball game. 2, I think it's better for your team to figuring out what their ceiling is. But there is part of it that I'm like, I would kind of rather play the Nationals and then maybe play a team that's like in the middle of it, like play like the Cardinals or the Pirates or something like that, and then work your way up and slowly play better competition. But guess what, folks? Believe it or not, of all the dumb things I've said over the years, they do not put me in charge of Major League scheduling. I don't blame them. I would not be able to figure it out. So my complaints, my goals, not important. All that matters are the teams in front of you. And with a tough 2-week stretch against all teams with 66 or more wins, all teams in playoff situations or playoff races, you're going to be looking at a very important stretch for the Phillies. And after that, when you look at September, well, it gets much easier. You have Toronto, then Miami for 4, the Rays, who are not that good this year, 1 game over 500, the Mets. You do have the Brewers one more time, but Mets, Cubs, National. Like the schedule is insanely easy after you get through this stretch compared to where you've been recently. This is the final gauntlet of the Philadelphia Phillies season, and it starts tomorrow. So with that in mind, a lot on the line, folks. We'll break down the Braves series a little bit more in depth and look at the pitching matchups and all of that tomorrow. So we'll dive into everything there. We'll also look back at some of the potential changes Rob Thomson could have made and debate whether or not he did make those. And also, there's something that I found out about earlier today that I need to dive a little deeper into. John Middleton, the owner of the Phillies, had some interesting things to say in an interview that we're going to break down, because when the owner talks, everybody listens. So we got a busy show tomorrow. Tune back in for it. That's all for today's episode, though. Thank you so much for checking us out. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. That's your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. You'll get notifications when new episodes are posted. It really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. It's the number one way to tell us thank you for the content. So I appreciate y'all doing that if you have already. And if you have not, please hit that subscribe button. We got a lot more work to do this year for Philadelphia Phillies fans on Locked On Phillies. And we're going to continue to do postseason episodes and off-season episodes. The grind doesn't stop here. Now's a great time to subscribe go ahead and take care of that. But most importantly, just thank you for joining me today for today's episode. And I'll talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.